Welcome back to another episode of High Conflict Divorce Demystified. We're talking about rebuilding after financial betrayal and infidelity. When you discover financial betrayal or infidelity in your marriage, it can feel like your whole world is crumbling. The pain and fear that come with such revelations are intense and often leave you questioning everything you once trusted. It can be particularly overwhelming when facing complex or high conflict divorce, and it's crucial to address these emotions and begin taking strategic steps to protect your financial future. Today's guest will be sharing some practical steps you can take to safeguard your interests, from gathering documents to understanding your rights. And it's essential to have a clear path and the right support to avoid being taken advantage of during this challenging time. So to help us dive into this topic, I'm thrilled to welcome Kimberly Rae Nelson. She is a certified financial advisor as well as a CDFA, a certified divorce financial advisor. Welcome, Kimberly.
Thank you so much for having me today. It really is a pleasure to be talking about this subject with you.
Yeah, it's such a tender, well, divorce in general is so tender. And then you add in something like financial betrayal or infidelity. And because divorce is all about the shared parenting time and decision making, and then this whole bucket of finances, it's such a
Mhm.
big part. And so I would love for you to maybe start at the beginning. If somebody is not even that aware of their financial standing, they're the non-moneyed spouse,
Yep.
and maybe finances haven't been so transparently shared. How does one even figure out whether or not there's something to worry about?
And that's a really good question. And there are quite a few indicators. If you're still living in the same house with your spouse and maybe you're at the very beginning of this process or just contemplating a divorce, there are a few different ways that you can start to try to detangle some of that and see if there are things going on that you don't know about. There's certain behaviors from spouses that I would encourage people to look out for. If you've been removed from a joint credit card, for example, if you were an authorized user and are suddenly no longer an authorized user on that credit card, that could be a really good indicator that something's going on that he's wanting to hide, or she is wanting to hide. Could go either way. Or if you notice that a card has been closed without your permission or without your knowledge, that's also kind of interesting. I also counsel my clients that are about to embark on the divorce journey here that it's really important to have a credit card in your own name that is separate. Even if you don't use it right away, just having one that's separate that cannot be shut down is important. But seeing a partner also suddenly being paranoid about checking the mail, wanting to get to the mail before you do, could be a big indicator that they're trying to hide something.
Right.
Um, these small little things. They may want to intercept any credit card statements or bills that they don't want you to know about. And also a little cautionary sidebar on this one as well. It's still unlawful in this country, even if you're married, to open up mail that does not have your name on it. So if you see a piece of mail that you don't really recognize and it has your partner's name on it, but not yours, technically you're not supposed to open it. So I want to caution everybody about that. If your partner opens it and leaves it laying on the kitchen counter, then I guess it's anybody's guess as to what happened. But yeah, seeing credit card statements or bills that either don't recognize or that it feels like they're trying to hide, you know, noticing a checking account balance that's lower than you think it should be. That happens to all of us, right? We just have an expensive May and suddenly we're checking in June and we see that it's lower. That could happen to any of us. But actually taking a look and scrutinizing some of those charges and making sure that they all are in fact charges that you recognize, charges that should be on there. If he went out on a Friday night and spent $300, that probably wasn't dinner for just himself, for example. You might see some trips or something like that on there that you don't recognize. But yeah, finding out a little bit more about those things.
So in the credit cards and checking account, I would imagine probably credit cards even more, just by combing through and seeing the
Mhm.
activity is one way. And A number of times my clients have found out that their soon-to-be ex has a credit card they didn't know about,
Yeah.
and maybe with a really high balance.
Mhm.
So are there certain ways that you have found are more typical for hiding this kind of behavior?
That's a good one. That's a common one when you find that they have a credit card in only their name. There's a little bit of good news about that, though. In a lot of states, I'm in California, so most of the advice that I provide is based around California's laws. But in California, if your spouse has a credit card in only their name and you're about to divorce, technically you're on the hook for each other's debts, right? But when you go to court and you're talking about settlements with your attorneys and whatnot, it's very easy to prove that those charges all belong to your ex-spouse or your soon-to-be ex. So it makes showing who is spending what a lot more important. From the date of separation, typically, they try to look at you as separate from spending purposes and assign those debts to that party. I will say, though, that even if your divorce decree assigns a debt that one of you incurred to one of you, if both of your names somehow are on that credit card application, your divorce decree does not supersede your agreement with the bank. So if debt is joint, for example, and it is assigned to one party during the divorce, that's all fine and good. But if that party does not pay, you're still going to have the same consequences if it's in your name. If your spouse truly opened up a credit card in their name only, which may or may not be the case, you could still be a joint party even if they have a credit card that only has their name. But if it's truly only in their name, then only they would be held liable for it by the credit card company. But it would still have to be worked out during your divorce, and you'd want it disclosed to both sets of attorneys so that they could work that out. But that's a pretty popular one, Karen. I think a lot of people have secret credit cards, and it's even happened to a couple of my friends in good marriages where they found out that their husband had a credit card that they'd bought a couple of things on. And I don't know that it was necessarily through nefarious intent, but they got a credit card and they bought a couple things, and their wives, my friends, were not happy when they saw the bill come in the mail, and just the fact that they didn't know about it didn't make them happy. So
Yeah, I think that just like other betrayal, like intimate betrayal, whether it's emotional or physical, sexual, financial betrayal just has that big broken trust and that gut punch that you get. And I'm wondering,
yeah.
with what you just talked about, one of the things that you said about if there's debt and it's assigned to one party, but that party might not be trustworthy to pay it.
Mhm.
As a CDFA, if you were working with someone, would you be looking at if the marital home is being sold and there's assets to actually take care of it before everything's wrapped up as opposed
Yes.
to afterward?
Yep. I'm a big fan of having debt paid off before you finalize the divorce, having the debt paid down. The only kind of debt that should still be outstanding would be somebody's school loan or a home mortgage. All other debts, you want to wrap that up before the divorce is final.
Right.
And again, if you guys are both convinced that one party ran up the debt, then their half needs to pay it off. If you are doing a distribution, let's say from the marital estate for each half, and he has run up $25,000 of credit card debt, she hasn't, well, make sure that the credit card debt gets paid off with the portion that he's getting distributed. You're distributing 100 to each party, his debt needs to pay off. So you both need to go into the end there with the debt paid off if you can. For some folks, that's not possible, but if you at all can, it's really best to do it that way. So again, home mortgage, if someone is staying in the home, that's going to be worked out in the settlement also, because typically the party that's leaving the home and not keeping the home doesn't want to be named on the mortgage anymore. But you'll get a period of time, 12 to 24 months, to do a refinance, which ironically is a big deal in divorces today, Karen, because interest rates have jumped up so much. If the divorcing parties bought the home 5 years ago and they have a 3% rate of interest, well, whoever has to go buy a new home now, they're facing 6.5%, 7% rate of interest. It's a totally different ballgame, totally different set of expenses. So it's a tough thing now with divorces. It's becoming a big point. Who gets to keep the house and possibly the lower mortgage if you can work that out?
Well,
Or
well,
if
hold on a second. You're going very quickly here. So let me just slow this down a pinch for our listeners. So what you're saying is really interesting. If I am buying my spouse out
Mhm.
and we have a 3% interest rate, and I don't know what the current rate is, but I think it's more
Like
like,
6.5, yeah, six and a
okay,
half, 7. Yep.
yeah. And I'm given a period of time to refinance. that has its own challenges too, right? Like if the interest rate continues to go up, if I don't have the documentation, if someone won't refinance for me. And we're going into a complexity here that's less about betrayal, but just since we're on this, any tips on for those people who are thinking about doing that? Because I would imagine, even if it's not nefarious, you could end up with quite a problem on your hand for the
Absolutely.
person 12 to 24 months going, I need another 12 months. I need another 24 months. And yet the other person's name is on the mortgage.
Exactly. So yeah, so that it can be an issue because again, if someone is staying in the home and they're not able to hold on to that lower interest rate, well, then the interest rate is going to jump. They're going to have to do a refinance to get their partner's name off of the loan. And they need to qualify on their own for a new mortgage because you have to go through that process again. So based on your income as a single individual and not as a couple anymore, now you've got to do that refinance. So you want to make sure that you can still qualify on your own. So if it's the let's say that we've got a husband and a wife and the wife is going to stay in the house with the two kids and he's going to go rent a condo somewhere or buy a condo, he's facing a higher rate of interest. If he demands that she refis and get his name off the mortgage there for the primary residence, then she's going to need to take her divorce decree with her alimony judgment and try to requalify for that loan. And that can be very difficult. So that's a consideration as you're negotiating things. You're right. It's less on the betrayal track here, but it's a big thing to think about and
Yeah.
probably a whole nother discussion that we should have at some point, Karen.
Absolutely. So getting back to, okay, so we started out that if I don't know whether or not there's anything nefarious going on, I can certainly look at the mail, I can take a look in the files, I can look through the history of credit cards and checking accounts. So let's say I know that he or she is having an affair, that they have a gambling issue, whatever it is. I know that that's part of the reason we're getting divorced because this thing has been going on. But I don't know how big it is. I know it's there, and
Mhm.
it could be a little problem. It could be an astronomical problem.
Mhm.
At that point, let's talk about what is the individual who knows but doesn't have a lot of information? What do they have to do? And I have three questions on this. What do they have to do? What are their legal rights? And who else do they need on their team? You've heard the saying, April showers bring May flowers. If co-parenting has been difficult this year due to your ex's alcohol abuse, you need SoberLink. How it works is simple. Your co-parent will test at scheduled times, built-in facial recognition will confirm their identity, Tampa sensors will flag any attempts to cheat, and results will get sent instantly to your phone, so you know that your kids are with a sober parent. Lay the groundwork for brighter days ahead. Visit soberlink.com/JBD to learn more and get $50 off your device.
So first of all, what do they need to do here to uncover this, figure out how big it is? I'll tell you, the first place to go, the roadmap to everything is the tax return. If you can take a look at your tax return, you can see where you have your money. The tax return does not lie. People lie, but tax returns generally tell the truth. So if you signed your tax return, your CPA has to give you a copy. So if you don't have a copy laying around, that's okay. Go straight to your CPA, they'll give you a copy. On there, it'll list every single account that you earned any money from in the prior year, whether it was interest or dividends, or if you had a stock sale or what have you, they'll all be listed. So now you have a list of everything that you own, you and your spouse together. The next step would be to try to secure statements for these pieces. That can be a little bit tougher. And the reason why it's a little bit tougher is because you may not have the logins to get online and find these things. The great news, though, is that if you are a named party to the account, the bank has to provide you with a login and a way to look. So you can simply walk into any bank and show your ID, and they must give you access to your bank statements. They have to do that, just like your CPA has to provide you with the copy of your tax return if you signed it. So you want to get those statements and see what's going on. And you're not necessarily looking for where money was spent, but you're looking for large withdrawals or deposits and seeing if money is going out. Are they taking out a lot of cash? Possibly they have a gambling problem. Or if they're taking out a lot of cash, they're paying for expenses of some kind, maybe a mistress or what have you, with cash. But if you see a lot of money going out and you are just unsure of why it's going out or where it's going, it means that we need to have a conversation. And again, it could be that you haven't filed for divorce quite yet, you're contemplating it, or maybe you are. So if you haven't filed for divorce yet, and the marriage is something that you are still maybe working on, it's time to have a discussion with your spouse. If you're not working on the marriage anymore and you are moving toward a divorce, it's time to have a discussion with your attorney, and quickly. Okay.
And I would imagine the discussion with your spouse, if you're on the fence, might be very telling.
Absolutely, absolutely. And you don't want to accuse, obviously, we don't have all the information. This is just an information gathering session if you're going to have a conversation with your spouse. You don't want to accuse, you want to have an open and honest conversation and just figure out what the problem is. There may actually be an explanation. There really could be an explanation here. There might be an investment that you didn't know that you had committed to 5 years ago, and this money is going out to that investment. Some investments call capital over time, especially in ultra high net worth situations. Right. There could be very reasonable explanations. It could be an estimated tax payment that you just didn't realize your spouse has to make. There could be reasons. So you want to just gather information.
I think that the red flag that I'm thinking about, Kimberly, is if they're not willing to have that transparent conversation. If it's like, don't worry about it, I have it covered, you don't have to concern yourself if there's deflection or projection or anything like that, to me, that would be a red flag to not back down, but push a little bit more. And I'm a grown individual here, and I may not have up until now, but I want to understand. I want to participate. I want to start having conversations. And for anyone on the line who is in the trying to mend rather than end right now, I really encourage you to put that on the table. And even if you have to, at a marriage counseling session, put on the table your desire to be more involved in the finances going forward. And if you could just speak for a moment, because I always have to have this conversation, the difference so often clients come to me, the non-moneyed spouse, and they talk about it is often the man. So I'm going to use this, although not always. They talk about his money. Mm-hmm. And I'm always saying, from this point forward, you must say ours. And can you just talk on that topic a little bit for a minute?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I agree with you 100%, Karen. The children that the non-moneyed spouse is spending their time with every day at home, she didn't make those children on her own. They're our children. The money is our money. When you get married, the two shall become one, right? You do that together. It is our money. And so you certainly have to make that distinction. And I think that a therapist's office is a wonderful place to start these discussions and to just let him know, I want to be more involved in the finances. If he pushes back, it's not just a red flag. I think it's a red flag on fire, basically, if he pushes back, because I think that any husband who really wants to be a partner would be thrilled that his wife wants to learn more about the finances. He'd be thrilled. Right. And would want her to have that education, because he's worried about what would happen to her if he were to pass away. He wants her to be okay if he were to pass away. So if he's not wanting to share, then I think if you cannot discuss it in front of the therapist, if maybe you're not in therapy currently and you think it would be problematic to suddenly suggest it, then what I would suggest is having the discussion with your financial advisor or your CPA, just saying to him, hey, I would really love to be more involved in this and just take a more active role in our finances so that I can be a better partner to you. Do you mind if I attend our next meeting with our financial advisor or with our CPA? And if you still are unable to do that, because even that might be a lot for some of the listeners out there, if you can't do that, then the next time you have to sign a tax return, which for a lot of people is just going to be in a couple short months, because if we filed an extension in April, all these returns are definitely due in October. So by August, September, we'll be sitting down with our CPAs. Then you just let your CPA know that you don't want to sign the return without coming in and personally discussing it all with him. And you'd love to do that with your husband also.
Right. So, beautiful.
Yep. So at that point, that's how I would start it, because it can be really daunting, and especially if you've never asked before, and especially if you think that your husband is going to get upset He shouldn't get upset. But if you think he's going to, and you think he's going to be nervous about it, then number one, you most definitely need to be getting involved because he shouldn't be nervous about it. But number two, there might be something going on and you need to know about it if he does. And it could be anything from something he's trying to hide to financial trouble that maybe he's not sharing with you, and maybe he's not making what he said he was making, or he's concerned about something. And as a partner, you'd want to help through that. You don't want him dealing with that alone either.
Right. Absolutely.
So,
Absolutely. So let's go back to this. I do some digging
mhm,
and the numbers aren't adding up.
mhm.
And there is more missing or having been spent or whatever than I ever would have expected. And things are contentious because we're heading into divorce. And so conversations are complicated
Yep.
and filled with whatever blame and accusation anyway.
Mhm.
What's my next step?
Yep. So in this case, if you're heading toward the divorce and things are contentious and whatnot, then your new partner is your divorce attorney. So your partner is no longer your partner. You are co-allies for your children at this point, and you don't want to be contentious or contributing to that. But your attorney is going to be your first person that you're going to meet and confer with. So what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to get all that information to your attorney in writing in an email, okay? And if you need to communicate with your soon-to-be ex on these issues, if you notice things that are missing, it's okay to reach out and ask what's going on, but you don't want to sound accusatory. And of course, you want to be prepared to be very honest yourself. If they're going to have questions, if they're going to respond with questions, you'll want to respond and be as honest as possible about, whatever you may know about the situation. So you can certainly ask, but you want to ask over email and say, hey, I'm just looking at a few things and trying to get a few things in order. And I have a few questions about some transactions that have occurred this year. And then just list them out right there and see what they say. If they don't respond at all, obviously that'll be something your attorney will bring up in the next conversation with their attorney or during your next settlement conference. If you're attempting to mediate, then you want to just keep very clear notes and bring that to the mediation so that the mediator can help you get those answers. But again, the ladder of how high we have to climb to get to a resolution here in divorce is dependent not just on you, but on your spouse. And if they will not be forthcoming with information, then mediation is probably not going to be possible and you'll have to go to the next step. If they still won't be open and honest with their own attorney, then settlement may not be an option and we have to go to the next step, which is trial. And there's a few stops in between as well. But ultimately, they are going to have to be honest and accountable to somebody over this. And the tax return, again, is your best friend when it comes to all of that, because the tax return is going to show you what is definitely happening. If there's a partnership that you're invested in that you don't know about because he signed the documents and you didn't, that's a common thing. If you have a trust, a revocable trust, only one of you has to sign documents typically. So it's very possible that you've got that. The tax return will lay it out.
When do you bring a financial forensic into the picture?
So a financial forensic, that's a really good question. Financial forensics are really highly trained and very skilled accountants. And they're usually brought in when you have an attorney and the attorney has identified some issues where there's not a clear path. We're not really able to see what's going on and we need someone to really review all the statements. Most ultra high net worth divorces will bring in a forensic accountant because there's just so much going on, and compensation structures can be very complicated at that point. There's unvested shares, there's options, different kinds of compensation can be very, very complicated. So having a forensic come in and really explain all of that is very helpful. I would say at the moment you are starting the divorce process, though, you do need a financial advisor. The financial advisor works in tandem with your attorney, but also very separately with the client to help reset expectations, help them understand what their bills are, help them understand what a realistic spending plan, I hate the word budget, it's a four-letter word in my opinion, but a conscious spending plan, a CSP, we put that together so that there aren't any surprises there when you sign the decree and when it's all done. We can help the attorneys also understand what kind of assets you own, what the tax nature is, what it's going to look like if we split this and that, or how much it really changes her financial picture if she gives this to him instead of that. The settlement process, if you're able to settle, that's ideal. And it really is a lot of negotiating back and forth. And we don't start negotiations with ultimatums. We have to be ready to bend a little bit and give in order to receive what's.
So what I'm hearing you say too is, and I so support this, is Whether you have a little money or you're in that really high net category, divorce is largely about money. It's shared parenting and money. And if you're not very schooled in numbers and you're not comfortable or you have a lot of fear around it, having a financial expert in your corner. And so many people say, yeah, but that's what my attorney does. And I just want to say that attorneys are schooled in the law, and if they're really good, they're awesome negotiators. Those are their two zones of genius. And they may know numbers, but people who do what Kimberly does, they know numbers, they've taken tests, they've studied things in a depth that far surpasses the vast majority of attorneys. And so it's you may see it as a cost, but it's actually an investment in your future because of the forecasting that you talk about, because of understanding the numbers, because they can look places that you and your attorney might not look for things.
Absolutely. You're very right about that, Karen. And I have to remind people a lot too that I'm no attorney and I'm also no CPA. I do not give legal advice and I do not give tax advice. I know an awful lot about the way those worlds work and I apply it to the world that I live in, which is finance. But the work that the attorneys do is really, really important and very, very different.
Yeah.
And you need all these people on your team. And I think that a therapist can certainly help too with a lot of the emotional stuff, because with a divorce, it's really a very complicated business partnership that's being divided up.
Right.
And that happens all the time in this country, and sometimes amicably and sometimes not so much. But with the divorce, the overwhelm and the fear creeps in so quickly and so regularly, because this is also the biggest relationship in your life, the biggest emotional relationship outside of what you may have with your children. But with any other adult, this is the biggest relationship, and that's changing a lot as well. So it's just a lot of change. And when you already don't have a high degree of confidence around the finances, perhaps it just really adds to the overwhelm because you're trying to learn about that and figure it out while going through this emotional process. So having a coach, having a partner on your team helping you figure out how to make what's fair in your divorce settlement, that's what your attorney is going to figure out, enough to live your life. So the attorney works out fair, and then I work out enough, because we figure out what your values are, what kind of life you want to live, what you really want to do. And then we try to reverse engineer into that through a conscious spending plan.
So I want to touch on one other area where we might be dealing with hidden funds, and that is if there's a family business, and especially a small business that kind of flies under radars. Can you just talk about, so if your spouse is, maybe they're partners in a medical practice or a legal practice, or they have their own little business, much like I have my own little business. There's a lot of ways that people are creative about expenses going through the business that should actually end up in the marital funds. Can you just talk a little bit about that?
Absolutely, boy, that is a really commonplace, Karen, probably number one where I see people hiding money or this financial infidelity occurring, because it is so easy to not be transparent with things. It happened not too long ago where a client of mine, her husband ran a construction business, and she knew that he would go to one of the big box construction stores, Home Depot, for example, and he would buy a bunch of gift cards from Home Depot to Amazon and to the grocery store and whatnot. And he would buy other things that were not business related, and he would call it a business expense because the receipt said Home Depot on it. And so that turned into a big issue during their divorce, because she was saying his business is counting a lot of expenses that really aren't expenses. And that one's a hard one too. It can be really tough to prove that to your attorney and whatnot. So that's a big place, keeping receipts and records of these gift cards or whatnot. Also, just with businesses, any kind of expense, you can pay for just about anything. And oftentimes, if your spouse is not a principal at the business, they would never have access to these records. They wouldn't have access to any of it. It would have to come through the tax return. And I would say most certainly you would need a forensic accountant in a case like that to really dig through the files of the business to figure out what was going on.
Because it
But
could look like you have a lot less annual income. And I think
exactly,
so many small business owners will like pay
they
their
do.
car insurance or do little things. So it's not
They do.
necessarily nefarious.
Mhm.
It may not be completely legal. It's not necessarily nefarious, but it's certainly something to look at.
But it does become the nefarious part comes in during the divorce, then when he's trying to buy her out of the business and it's being valued at a lower valuation.
Yes.
She's saying, wait a minute, no, no, no. And also when we establish the marital standard of living and we're not seeing all the groceries because they were through gift cards that were run through his business. And so he's saying, look, our family spends $400 a month at the grocery store. And she's saying, no, we don't. We spend 2,000. We go to Whole Foods, but it was actually purchased through gift cards. So it can really skew a lot of things there. And you are absolutely right, though, Karen. A lot of businesses do this. And I always believe that we must maintain the highest integrity within ourselves when we're dealing with our finances with the US government and whatnot. Anything low integrity, I would frown upon. But I do realize that practice is relatively common. And it's one of those things, it's not a problem until it's a problem. And it becomes a big problem when we go through a divorce and now we have to work some of these things out. So,
I want to touch on one other thing, and that is if you're the moneyed spouse, and
mhm,
let's just keep the gender roles the way we're talking about. You're the moneyed spouse, you're the husband,
mhm,
and you're high net, and your wife is a spendthrift. And so
mhm,
now you're entering divorce and you're
uh-huh,
trying to rein in spending because
mhm,
so I have a number of male clients in this
mhm.
situation where it's like money is flying out faster than I can make it. And I know it's not necessarily nefarious, but I think it falls into that really complicated situation.
Uh-huh.
What do you advise a moneyed spouse to do when they're trying to do the right thing, but they're also trying to rein in spending that's really beyond their means and is going to impact their family and their kids going forward?
Now, are we talking about pre-divorce where we're still trying to mend, or we've already decided to
No
end?
mending. We're not
No
talking.
mending. Okay, no more mending.
We are
Okay.
not. We're not in the mending field here.
Not the mending. Okay, yeah, okay. So then my advice is actually really similar to what I said earlier. It's we've got to separate the spending. So whatever, let's say that she is the one that's out spending and he is really concerned about it. She needs to put her spending onto a separate card and she needs a separate bank account. And we need to make sure that while we're going through this divorce process, that distributions from the marital estate are equal until we figure out what is going on. Okay. His paycheck can still be routed into a joint account, but we have to make sure that whatever she's taking from that joint account to spend and what he is taking, that they are the same. And you do this with your attorneys, okay? Your attorneys will put together what we call a temporary support order and some rules around spending. And again, if she's not spending outside of what the marital standard of living has been, then that's just what it is, and we need to work that out, and coming up with a conscious spending plan on both sides needs to happen. But if she is suddenly going on a spending spree because she knows divorce is happening,
Right.
which happens a lot, some people receive counsel from their friends and family and whatnot to ratchet up spending to make it look like their lifestyle is more expensive.
Yes.
This does not work. I do not recommend that. It's not a good idea. It puts you in a worse position in the long run. And you're not going to suddenly reestablish a new marital standard of living in 3 months. They're going to look at the last 5 years. You need to still be judicious about your spending and be reasonable. Take care of yourself, obviously, and your children. And if you have a new greater expense that pops up, again, transparency, having a discussion, letting your soon to be ex know if it's related to the children, let them know and say, we need to come up with a plan to pay for this. Children may need counseling or something additional during this procedure, this process of divorce. And you're going to want to provide that to them. And you're both going to be aligned in that goal. My advice to all couples out there, if you have a mismatch in ideology when it comes to spending, is to sit down and reassess your joint goals. The advice, it's not too different when you're separating. You're going to have some joint goals related to your children, and you're going to have your own separate goals as well. Some joint goals related to your children might be that they have equal housing with both parents. So coming together to the table to figure out how that is going to happen is necessary. You've got to work that out. But yeah, if you're seeing one spouse spending a lot, it just needs to all be documented and make sure that you're getting separate as quickly as you can. You make sure all of your expenditures are on a separate credit card as well, and show proof that you've not used any of the joint credit cards. So if she's been spending on the joint cards, we know it's all her because you closed your part of the card. You cut it up or you took your name off the account or what. But I would recommend getting separate as quickly as you possibly can.
Now, I have a question, and this might be more of a legal question, but let me throw it at you. So I know that in many states, when you go through the courts, when you go the litigation route, there's a timestamp, and there is a rule that there is no spending outside of the normal day-to-day needs. Like nobody's going out and buying a Jaguar or a boat or taking a trip to Dubai. You're staying. So I don't know, and I'm curious if you could speak about if the spending continues in court, at least in California, what happens if they don't abide by that, stay within just the normal usual? Are there any penalties, or does that require another court order to move the ball along?
Yeah, that's a really good question, and it is more of a legal question. And just to remind all your listeners, I don't give legal advice.
Right.
But what would likely happen there is, again, once you're separated, the date of separation is a big thing here in the state of California. We really do look at spending as separate. So I believe that you will have some protections here if one spouse is spending significantly more than the other. In the end, when we're doing the division and whatnot, their spending will be accounted for in that division. And when we have the true up payment, if he's paying her, it would be a little bit less if she's spent a lot more. I would just really encourage everyone to keep your attorney very informed as to what's going on, especially if it feels like it's out of the norm or inappropriate, because your attorney may not be able to necessarily put down an order through the courts onto your spouse to stop spending. But at least if it's documented, if you wind up in trial, then you have that information and you're better protected.
Yeah, and you've mentioned trial a few times. I just want to say to people, 98% of people never go to trial. So just if you're new to this,
So
I don't want you hearing this trial word and thinking, oh my God. It's really the high net worth people who have enough money to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars preparing for trial and a lot of money to fight over that end up in trial. And I've had some clients go to trial, but in 14 years, not a lot. Yes, I just wanted to add that caveat. And then the other thing on this is I assume it would be the same. So whether I'm mediating, collaborating, or litigating, this idea of one spouse overspending during a 3 or 6 or 12-month period after the date of filing or whatever that is, regardless of mediation, collaboration, litigation, is your experience that can be documented and adjusted at the end?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yep, absolutely. You're right. A vast majority of these cases settle, and settling means that we wind up 70% happy, not 100% happy. So I think that both parties, if you come in with the common goal in mind, which is let's get separated, let's take care of our children, then if you can get 70% of the way there, settlement, unfortunately, neither side's going to be 100% happy.
Yeah, and I think that where we happen to be talking to an audience where emotional, verbal abuse, legal abuse, financial abuse, these are waters that a lot of our listeners swim in, which is why this is such a helpful conversation. So if we could wrap up maybe with your 3 key tips, and then if you would share with our listeners how you help people even post-divorce, just so that, and how they can reach you.
Yeah, absolutely. 3 key things. Number 1, financial infidelity is not a money problem. It's a relationship problem. Okay. So it's a symptom. It's not the disease. It's a symptom. So don't ignore it and make sure that you're staying informed. Even if you are the non-moneyed spouse, with a company, Department A is going to update Department B and vice versa. They're not going to do each other's jobs, but they're going to keep each other informed. So stay informed. Number 2, make sure that you have access to your team, your financial advisor, your CPA, your trust attorney. Make sure that you know who these people are and what they're doing on your behalf. And number 3, I guess, open and honest communication in all things. We maintain a high level of integrity in all of our dealings with people, with money. What we put out into the world is generally what we get back. You always approach all of these situations with a high degree of integrity, openness, honesty, and a resolve to solve the problem and not create it bigger through accusations and things like that.
And tell us a little bit about Coastal Bridges. And
absolutely. Coastal Bridge Advisors is my firm, and we are independent. We have the resources of one of the largest banks in North America, and Our firm manages money for high net worth individuals. Wealthy people have depended on us to create a sustainable stream of income that is tax efficient and reliable. And that's really what we need in divorces as well, especially if you're the non-moneyed spouse. I've built quite a career working with the non-moneyed spouse in a lot of cases to make sure that we have a sustainable stream of income that they can depend on, but in addition, possibly to a couple of other income sources, working or alimony and child support. But investing really is my passion. That's where it all started. And that's what I do for clients. But planning is a big part of that. Our firm is very planning based. And every client that comes to us has a financial plan before they have an asset allocation. Any questions? Feel free to reach out to me and would love to have a conversation.
Okay. And you have a free gift for our audience?
Oh, of course. Anybody that wants to have a conversation, obviously, we can have a consultation. That is not something we charge for. If you'd like to have a conversation, I would love to do that with you. We'd love to hear about your situation and see how I could possibly help. So yeah, there's no charge at all for that.
Excellent. In the show notes are the many ways that you can reach Kimberly, her website, her social media, and a link for the free consultation if you're interested in that. And Kimberly, thank you so much. Thank you, first of all, for what you do in the world and the people that you help. And that's such a big portion of your business is helping people through divorce, which I always love to connect with folks like you who do that. And thank you so much for coming and just sharing your experience and wisdom with our listeners.
Thank you, Karen. And the platform that you provide as a community of resources for people that are going through divorce, it's so important. And I really applaud the work that you're doing. And I'm thrilled to be a part of this with you. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And we'll be back again real soon with another episode of High Conflict Divorce Demystified. You take care. You've been listening to our podcast, Getting Educated, Regulating Your Emotional Reactions, and it's been really helpful. Yet you know you could do better, be better, and you're wanting and needing more support. That's where our coaching service is a game changer. We're here for you when you need us the most, ensuring you have all the tools and resources at your fingertips, guiding and supporting you to be more effective. Our free rapid relief call helps you gain a broader perspective, commit to your best next steps, and determine what coaching support is right for you. Visit rapidreliefcall.com to book your call today. Thanks for joining us on the Journey Beyond Divorce podcast. I hope you found guidance and encouragement to help you along your journey. If you like my podcast, please take a minute to subscribe and leave a review on iTunes. You can also visit us at jbddivorcesupport.com, where our team of coaches support both men and women through our one-on-one coaching, group programs, online courses, and free resources. Stay tuned for our next episode, and I'll talk to you soon.